Hello, and welcome to Launchpad, this special interview series part of Rocket Fuel. Today, we're talking to Jasper the Friendly Ghost, who is an extremely popular and well-known and well-respected member of the Rocketpool community. Jasper is extremely active in the Discord channel, but he also has a large Twitter following where he shares tweets about Ethereum and especially about Rocketpool. Jasper, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we can start talking?
Absolutely. Some of you might know me by my very interesting colored Discord role. I am officially known as the community advocate. I'm very grateful to the Rocketpool core team for giving me this sort of one-off role. And it's sort of in recognition of some of the things I've done for the community over the years. I joined Rocketpool back in about 2021, and since then I've tried to do a lot of writing and sort of theory crafting about the protocol and its future direction. I've been hosting Twitter Spaces with Darren Langley, our lovely general manager, every other week for quite a while now, honestly. Feels like forever. But it's great. I love being able to have this direct insight into the dev team and then relay stuff back to the community and sort of serve as a bridge when, sometimes things can get a little bit of salt emoji. But I love it. I love contributing to the Ethereum ecosystem. That's really why I'm here. As we'll get into, I studied philosophy in undergrad. Being a moral person is sort of my driving impetus, seeking out knowledge, and that led me directly to Rocketpool and crypto. And yeah, that's who I am.
That's great. I'm so happy to have you here because we've obviously been talking to each other for quite a while, but this is the first time we've actually talked to each other, and
That's right.
I'm really excited about this. But even already, I feel like we have like a kind of kinship, which is really awesome. So I'm really happy about that. Anyway, let's get started. Like you said, like you studied philosophy. You're quite young, right? Like compared to some of the other people who've been
Probably
on.
the youngest yet.
Yeah, I think so. So, you just graduated from college.
Oh, Thomas G is really young too.
Yeah, Thomas G is quite young. Yeah, but let's yeah,
Sorry.
that's cool. But so tell me, like you went to college. Like when did you get into crypto? Like,
Yeah. So I first heard about Bitcoin back in 2016, my high school economics class.
okay, so
You
you were
could
in high
see me
school in 2016.
yes,
Okay,
in 2016.
I was in high
Yes.
school way longer ago than that. So yeah, okay.
uh,
So sorry, carry
it
on.
actually might have been 2015 when I took econ. But I would be in the corner of the class. The class was a joke to me, and what I would spend most of class doing is this is actually a little embarrassing, but Martin Shkreli, also known as the Pharma Bro,
Mm-hmm.
he would do Twitch live streams where he would just talk about biotest talks, TIA technical analysis while playing chess. And at some point, he started talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And here I was in an economics class, which was just supply and demand curves, listening in on 1 year to Martin Shkreli talk about Bitcoin. And, it's sort of like the gears started turning. It was not until I graduated high school and went on to college that I sort of convinced my parents to let me make my first purchase. And pertinent to the rest of the story, to this day, my only fiat to crypto purchase ever. I've only onboarded into crypto once, and it was that moment back in 2017.
What did you buy?
ETH. So I actually spent a little while on this purchase. So this is back in the ETH trader days, right? Prior to the schism where ETH finance was formed. And, it was like Bitcoin hits $1,000 or something. I'm reading this articles from what Martin Shkreli put up. I hear about Ethereum and it's just like, it's done, right? I read Vitalik's writings. I hear about the roadmap at the time, sharding, but proof of stake was still
Mm-hmm.
incredibly sound in
Yeah.
theory, what its main goals were. And it just seemed like the future, no brainer. Just the idea of smart contracts, it was such a 0 to 1 moment. And I'm still to this day sort of in belief when people are stuck in the Bitcoin train when there was just such a huge world. But essentially, that period in time, I was 80% Ethereum, 10% Bitcoin, 5% OMG, 5% Cardano.
Oh wow. Okay. So that in 2016, you said, or 2017?
2017. Yeah,
So that
2017.
I guess you got in at a time when you're still profitable on those buys, right? Like, so
Oh, everyone was green.
yeah,
Every single one.
wonderful. So I guess you never had that moment where people just like, you wasted all your money and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting that
But I
you,
did ride it all the way down into, and I saw the $80 bottom in college. I remember sitting there. It was the 20. There were two bottoms right around 80. The first one, the actual bottom, $88 was in 2018. But then there was also like the second near bottom in 2020. I remember the $88 one being way, way worse. Like the COVID dump
Hmm,
was scary in a way, but there was so much else going on in the world at the time
yeah.
that crypto was just so far out of mind.
So you were you were listening to Twitch streams like Pharma Bro, and then he went off to jail, right? So
Yes.
did that ever like shake your confidence in crypto because he was the person that got you into it, or had you moved past it by then?
There's a funny story where I almost won $50,000 from Martin Shkreli, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to Princeton for undergrad. I studied
Okay.
philosophy there.
Yeah.
And my first year there, Martin Shkreli actually gets invited to campus to do a lecture. This was just a few months before he was arrested. And
Mhm.
he starts this lecture with this whole speech about how he won't be arrested, how all the charges will be dropped, and it's all a fraud. And then after this speech, he goes onto the blackboard and he writes this math problem down. And he turns to the crowd and he says, the first person to solve this problem, I will pay the rest of their tuition.
Okay. So what happened?
So I immediately am not a math major. I don't know how to do real analysis. I like to watch number file videos.
Yeah.
I cannot solve this problem, but I'm clever. And so I Googled it and I researched, and because I knew Martin Shkreli is essentially a fraud, right?
Yeah.
He's a fraud with clever packaging.
Hmm.
And so he's not writing this problem. He's not actually a genius. He found it from a textbook, and I found the textbook. And I found a solution in the textbook.
So
So I write it.
yeah, what happened?
So I write I write the answer down on a piece of paper, and not like a minute into me writing it, someone else put their hands up. I got it. They go in, they submit it. I finish my answer, and I still raise my hand and say, "What if they're wrong?
Yeah.
Does second place get it?" Right? And he was like, "Yeah." So just everyone, as soon as you figure it out, put their. So I go in and I get in second.
Mm.
Turns out Martin Shkreli does in fact get arrested. Years go by, and I get curious. I wonder if he ever paid out.
Like,
And I
yeah.
find out, I find him on a Facebook live stream. No, this is an article. This because he was already arrested. But I do find out in an article that he had in fact paid the first kid
Wow.
approximately $40,000. So I was this close. But
That's a great story. Okay, so Princeton, right? Like, tell me about this
yes.
Princeton crypto club that was going on. Like, what was that all about?
There actually was no Princeton Crypto Club. There was,
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
I'm mistaken.
Uh,
What was it like being at Princeton and being in crypto? Was there any kind of discussions happening around that kind of stuff?
Tons, absolutely. When I first started, uh, people were all in ICOs. Everyone was talking about the ICO mania. I remember being in chemistry lab because I was a pre-med student,
Mm-hmm.
and my lab mate and I were talking about Ripple. Is Ripple a security? Is Ripple fake? Blah blah blah. So when I started, everyone was talking about it, and I managed to find a good few friends who were into like the scene originally, like OG miners, but it was a lot of surface level, like
Mm.
tons of like, even though like it's Princeton, it's Ivy League, yada yada, there was not the same depth. The depth you would expect, it was not there. People like from the whole spectrum were still falling for all the ICO scams.
So how deep were you in at that time?
So I sort of fell off right around when Maker had its issues with DAI. So
Mm.
I would say like in that era, the time I was most interested in crypto was like when DAI first came out, when single collateral DAI, and I was like, this is it. They figured it out. Like this is the first non-governmental form of currency that's stable that anyone can create, transfer. It's like, isn't it, this was the point of crypto, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
honestly, to this day, that's still not true, right?
Stablecoins are such a great invention, and it is definitely, I think, one of the few like killer apps of crypto right now, even now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting into a discussion with a relative about Dogecoin, and I didn't tell them that I was into crypto at the time. He's like, "You can use
Right.
Dogecoin for payments," and I was just like, "Why would you use Dogecoin for payments when you can use a stable coin?" And
Hmm.
he was like, "What's a stable coin?" And I was just like, "I'm not gonna have this discussion anymore." But stable coins are absolutely amazing, like definitely. Where do you fall on the stable coin like line right now about like USDT, USDC, DAI, like RAI? What's your flavor of choice?
I think there definitely is, just like there is a blockchain scaling trilemma, there is a stablecoin scaling trilemma where you have centralization, uh, total liquidity, and stability. Right. So you can have two of these. You can be a centralized and very stable. You can be USDC, USDT. You can be decentralized and have a very high cap, but you can't actually be on peg. You have to allow the natural market forces. You can be very, the other one is you can be very decentralized and have a wide, actually, no. But the point is, it's a trilemma.
Yeah,
It's very hard to pick all three. I think the closest we will ever get is if we can actually play out this sort of uh, multi-party DAI scaling solution where you have all of these government entities with all their debt backed on chain. DAI is actually like tons and tons of different government assets, but it's also a ton of different Ethereum or on chain assets. The only way this ends up being sustainable is like we have good regulation worldwide.
yeah,
Uh, I don't think RAI is ever going to scale to meet the USDC demand.
yeah,
And I don't think, conversely, USDC is ever going to decentralize enough to meet the DAI demand, per se. So
yeah.
it's open field and it's challenging. I
I
think
think,
we're very far from figuring it out.
yeah, definitely. I think we're at least another cycle, if not more, away from having good answers on that issue. The thing is as well, like with central bank digital coins like coming out now, digital currencies, like they are going to really muddy the fields even more because would you
Mm-hmm.
go CDBC or would you go crypto stable coin? It's gonna definitely this is gonna be a big battle that's gonna play out over the next cycle, I think.
Right.
It's gonna
Yeah.
be really interesting to see how it goes. So tell me about medicine. Like what made you want to be pre-med? Like how was that for you at college? How did it all go? And how does that fit with where you are now?
Right. So I'm sort of all over the place, right? I have a philosophy degree, yet I do crypto things, yet I want to be a doctor. Uh, and it all sort of comes from philosophy, sort of like my takes on life. Uh, I've always had a medical background. I actually went to a medical high school, and that's an aside. Uh, but practicing healthcare, it gives you a different type of outlook on life. I had a Twitter debate actually on a thread where I'd said, should I go full time Web3 or should I pursue medicine? And someone made the claim that, well, if you really think you want to go into medicine to be a good person, shouldn't you just go Web3, get a bunch of money, and then donate it all? You know, like the SBF, effective altruistic take.
Yeah.
And uh, I remember the moment I decided in undergrad that no, medicine actually is the one for me was when I really started thinking about utilitarianism and if it was like that more outlook on life that I personally wanted or believed in. And the more I thought about it, the more I sat there and pondered, it just falls apart. Utilitarianism, it just doesn't hold up to real life situations. The main weakness it has, in my opinion, is it has no valuation of emotional distance, right? So Peter Singer is a very famous utilitarianism and utilitarian, and he has this example of compare two situations. In one situation, you are a rich person and you see someone drowning in water. You could jump in to save them, but you're going to ruin your $800 suit. In the next case, you could donate $800 to mosquito nests. And studies have shown, on average, $800 worth of nests will save one person's life. In a utilitarian perspective, these are very similar, right? You've saved a kid's life physically, you've donated enough money for nets to save a life. But like, if you lived those two situations, one of those is going to change your life forever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
utilitarianism just doesn't account for that. It can't account for that, the size of that. How do you account for it? You get into a lot of subjective theories, subjectivist theories, which is actually why I spent most of my philosophy under education studying like Buddhism, Nietzschean ideologies, perspectivism, existentialism, things that sort of question objective truth, which is, I think, very important for crypto. Because in crypto, we have the common saying, code is law. Like, we found it. We found an objective source of truth in the world, and it was going to be the blockchain. That's wrong. The Bitcoin fundamental thesis is wrong. The 21 million supply cap is only true insofar as the social layer deems it to be true.
Yep.
So the most objective, the most hardline people in the world who think something is objective, it's still a little subjective.
Absolutely. Like if you go like 3 halvings forward, the fees don't rise in the same way as issuance drops, price doesn't rise in the same way, then they've got an existential crisis in their hands. Like they're gonna have
to tail commissions.
Yeah, they're gonna have to change things, right? They're gonna have to change something, either remove the supply cap or increase fees or something. It has to give, something will have to give. And that's really interesting way of putting it. I really like that. So tell me about this Twitter thread, like crypto, Web3 or medicine. Like what were your thoughts making that thread? Where do you stand now? Like what's going on?
Yeah, I was honestly curious, like, what is crypto Twitter going to say, right? Is crypto Twitter going to be as like profit maxi, as utilitarian as I expect, or are they going to surprise me? And I also wanted to like sort of have some discussion about what the values of our community are, and also just see good opinions, right? And so I made the poll. It got like 500 votes, a good amount of votes. And funny enough, go to med school won out. People were like, follow your passions, follow your dreams. You can probably do Web3 on the side, if anything. And, you know, crypto Twitter impressed me a little bit. I was quite happy.
I voted on that by saying you should go to crypto Twitter, go to Web3. And I was kind of selfish in that because I really respect you in Web3 and like your writings and your thoughts. And I feel like we need more people like you in Web3. So I was like, come to Web3. I'm like, the world's got enough doctors.
I'm sure it'd be better for our RPL bags.
No, it's not just that. Of course, not just that. I honestly feel like there's not enough. Like, I feel like crypto Twitter, crypto communities as a whole are kind of overrepresented by certain types of people. And I feel like the voice that you bring is slightly different from, well, very different in some ways from the voices other people bring and like lived experiences you bring. And that is only amazing for the crypto community in a way that we really desperately need. And that I was going from that perspective. So I think like you're going to do amazing things, whatever you do decide. So it's really cool to see that.
Appreciated.
Yeah, let's take a step back. So you're in ETH finance, you're hanging out, well, ETH trader, ETH finance back in the day.
Yeah.
It kind of falls back, like, you know, real life gets in the way, college gets in the way, all that kind of stuff. When did you start talking about crypto again or hearing about crypto again? How did that happen?
It's the orange.
Yeah.
It was Rocketpool. So I still like vaguely follow like the schism of ETH trader, ETH finance sort of like rebirthed a bit of interest in me, but then that fell off again into the 2020 dump. And it was not until first Bitcoin reclaimed its all-time high. And then I started more closely following ETH finance again. ETH trader was just god awful since this schism.
Garbage dump.
Yeah, I've since unsubscribed years ago, including some days I'd go back and forth on unsubscribing from the main Ethereum subreddit too, and just limit it to just ETH finance. But I keep it open just in case I can give a good response if it's needed.
I started checking years ago. Yeah.
So it was
an
ETH finance post about a beta. Rocketpool was doing an open beta. Right. This was January of 2021.
Yeah, early 2021. Yeah. Okay, so
so I joined. Yep, I saw the post. And I was like, "Whoa, decentralized staking! This is gonna be huge." It's just like a clear product market fit. Had not obviously Zero's thesis wasn't out at this point. Then I joined the Discord, and I remember just such a profound moment the first time on the testnet staking ETH for rETH. It was the first time I'd like really used the Ethereum network. Like back in 2017, I was one of those like buy on a centralized exchange and just sit and watch numbers go up and down.
Yeah.
It was like I had bought a MKR in actually no, that was later. Yeah, my very first like real crypto transactions, I would say, were testnet staking rETH.
Nice.
So, and then I immediately went into general, and I was like, oh my god, I just staked. This feels so cool. I feel like I'm contributing to the network research problem. And I was still like pretty green shoe, did not understand quite the nuances of rETH versus stETH. Like I knew stETH was permission, but I didn't understand like uh, the extent of the differences and just the extent of Rocketpool's protocol design until sort of like bathing in the Discord for another year.
Yeah. So how was it? Those were like relatively the early days, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I know that a whole lot of people came in because of Zero's thesis. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess getting in there before Zero's thesis was kind of there must have been a very different community then from what it became later. Like how was it in those early days for you? Like
It was good enough to convert me from a lurker.
yeah.
So yeah, Zero's thesis comes out, and then I sort of come across it on ETH Finance and decide, oh, maybe there's more to the Rocketpool Discord. So I go back, and that's when I discovered trading, and so I really became active in Rocketpool in April, like a month after his thesis.
Mm.
Um, and then when it was like, okay, there are some really knowledgeable people here about Ethereum. Let's start asking as many questions as I physically can constantly because I can't say no.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you put it like that because I guess all of us were like newbies at one point, right? And
Mhm.
I feel like the Rocketpool community has been so great at welcoming people like those newbies, like that we were at one point, and people have really. Wait, you're kind of nodding along knowingly. Like, what are you
there's
thinking?
there's a good story because my very first RPL was so at this time I still only had the ETH that I bought back in 2017, and it was a very small. We're talking like triple digits USD terms,
Okay.
and so gas costs were like huge for me, especially because we were in bull run times at the time,
Yeah.
bull market, and so I was like, hey guys, I don't want to use the DEX. I don't want to pay like $40 for a Uniswap trade when I'm only buying like $100 of RPL. Uh, is anyone willing to do an O2C trade with me? And I started talking to Zero, and he was like so confused why I wanted to do an OTC for like I don't remember, but like a tiny amount of RPL, right?
Yeah.
But he was still willing to do it, and he even fronted me the gas costs.
That's
And
nice.
I think it's just such a sweet thing for Zero having just dropped his thesis recently, and who was already a rocket scientist, but not it wasn't called rocket scientist yet. I don't believe.
Mm.
Uh, it's just so sweet of him and so accepting. And there were so many stories in the early like April into the end of the year of raffles, and that's like where I built up a large chunk of my RPL holding before then starting to do some community work, which has then also been quite kind to me.
So the raffles, I remember Patricio had like 10 days of raffles, right? Am I remembering that right? Because I wasn't that involved in the community at the time. So I kind of have like vague memories of stuff that was happening around then. Was that around
Mm-hmm.
just before launch? That was about
So,
just before the fair launch.
yes.
Yeah.
So that was our like the triumph, the peak of the POAP madness when trading had just completely overdosed on POAP and Patricio just sitting there like, yes, Rocketpool has turned completely into POAP because for mainnet, we did a POAP a day and a raffle a day for 30 days, I believe. We were
Wow.
doing balancer ecosystem, Reddit, just daily Gwei, Bankless, just every corner of the Ethereum ecosystem. We were trying to like create really grassroots, just let's make a pull up together, then we'll do a raffle together with our communities together, and we're just going to celebrate Rocketpool launching. And then it didn't.
No, I know. Oh my God. That was horrible because I was just getting into the community at that time.
Yeah.
I think I made my first purchase in September of 2021. Vaguely remember it
Mm-hmm.
being around then. So I was like so excited about launch, and then launch doesn't happen, and it was really bad because I totally like fell down the Rocketpool like rabbit hole at that point. And I remember
Mhm.
having a dream at one point that like launch failed a second time and like Rocketpool went to zero. Like it was taking
No.
over my mind completely. So it's really funny that that happened. Well, now thinking back, like it was horrible at the time, but like thinking back,
Yeah.
we can laugh about it now. But it was quite scary at the time, right? Like
Oh, it was
on
crazy.
launch day, launch gets
Yeah.
cancelled. Like how were things in the community at that point?
Oh man. So the announcement goes out, and it's almost a blur. It's kind of a blur at this point, but it was quite sad. People were very unsure. Tons of people were happy, but it was. Oh, I remember there was a lot of dialogue between people on whether this was a good thing or not. Fundamentally, it was amazing. It was pivotal that it was caught. Right.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there was a lot of people like that were caught up in the launch hype that sort of just speculatively bought into RPL, who are now sitting in a daily pretty heavy loss, right? Heavy loss. It was clearly going to risk off when you have a day zero bug found, right? So it was toxic for a while.
Yeah.
People were sitting on some economic losses and were like, Rocketpool's never going to launch. There was just a bug found. How can you be happy? Versus the people were like, no, step back. We just averted a huge loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so you should be happy. But it was a sad day. It took
Yeah.
quite a while for the community to move on.
And then it was like what, another 5 or 6 weeks, right, before we launched.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember I was more of a lurker at that time in trading. I think I had odd message here or there. And I remember definitely being on the side of, it's better that we found it now rather than later. But it made sense, I guess, why some people didn't feel that way. Like it was
Right.
difficult. It was definitely difficult.
Yeah.
So Rocketpool just kind of became your corner of the crypto space.
Pretty
And
much, it completely absolved all my presence. I pretty much stopped using e-finance for a long time. Even
yeah.
just trading became my home. And there was one crystallizing moment, and I think looking for owls will be quite upset if I don't mention this story. It was April like 5th, and it is henceforth has been referred to as Big POAP 69 Day. Uh, it was the release of the stage 3 tokenomics paper, so just tons of hype. Early in the day, Darcius had trolled trading by sending fake pings. So everyone is already whipped up into a frenzy. Tokenomics paper drops. The frenzy continues. POAPs are dropping. The frenzy builds. And then people start noticing, hey, I think Logic Beach was first. My friend, Logic Beach's friend, just got 6.9 RPL. Did someone send it? So people were like, I don't know what you're talking about. Turns out Logic Beach has posted an address in chat earlier, and someone had used that to send RPL. And then people who had ENSs set started getting a varying amounts of RPL, 6.9, 69 RPL.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everyone posting their addresses. Kron just losing his mind. No, this is such a terrible doxing moment. Everyone is doxing themselves. And RPL is flying. Everyone's getting drops. Looking for owls. Gets instead of RPL, gets a giant
NFT.
penis NFT, a
Yeah.
rainbow penis NFT,
Yeah.
with a message. I also got I got a very large amount of RPL that like doubled my stack in that one moment, and
Nice.
I've since managed to find out who actually was the RPL dropper that day.
No,
I do know who it is. They
really?
are
That's
yeah.
that's very, very, very privileged information you have right there. I've heard a lot of theories about who that person was, but no one knows for sure. So if
I'm just
you
curious. If you have a guess, like off your dome, if you had to guess,
that
I'm just
it's
curious.
a team member.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was a team member. But
I can tell
LFO
you
and
it's
I,
not.
that's fine. LFO and I have talked quite extensively about it,
Mhm.
so much so that LFO is going to come on Launchpad and we're going to talk about the whole thing. So
I hope I didn't steal his thunder.
I think you're going to be getting a lot of DMs from him in the next few days.
My lips are sealed.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't know.
sorry.
You might be able to get it out of you. That's really funny. Okay, well, that's fascinating that you know who that is. I might have
Easily
to.
one of my favorite nights.
Yeah,
Did I lose you?
I know a lot of people who talk about that night as their one of their favorite Rocketpool community nights. How did that compare to the benefactor? So I wasn't around for big POAP 69, right? Like the benefactor was kind of similar, right?
Mhm.
Like what was happening there?
Yeah. Well, so the vibe was different, right? During the big POAP 69, this is pre-launch. This is like a much, much smaller crowd of people. And so everyone knew everyone. And so it was very easy to like the hysteria to build to like a boiling point like that. And it was totally a surprise and a flash in the pan moment, which was instantly cut off because people could not just keep posting their addresses like that. Whereas RPL Benefactor was a much more like the community has grown up moment, uh, where now we're like, in some ways, it's the spiritual successor to the POAP 69. It's so the community, same energy, the sort of like euphoric, let's give back and celebrate, but in a much more controlled, adult-ish form.
Hmm. So
So
who's the
had,
benefactor?
I don't actually know.
Oh, no one knows. It's really well, Fizz knows, but that's about it. It's as far as we know. So
I do not know.
wow.
That exceeds my.
I thought you might have
I have
had
my
I,
tentacles in many places, but that
I
is not
think
one.
I think you got to message Fizz and try to find out from him.
Hmm. Well, maybe I can trade him some names.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
A
then
little quid pro quo.
LFO is friends with Fizz, so like we met up in Chicago a few weeks ago, right? So
Oh, I was so jealous of that.
maybe he'll try to get some names back and forth there. But so you're like fully entrenched in the Rocketpool community now. Like how how has that been for you? Like now that you know you've been around for over nearly 2 years now, like
Yeah.
how would you count this part of your life compared to like other journeys you've been on and communities you've been
So
part of?
rewarding. So rewarding. I feel like I managed to combine some of my interests that I previously had not been able to explore in a way that was also rewarding for everyone around me, which I'm very grateful for.
Like give me examples.
Like I'd always been interested in math and economic game theory. I was a former debater at Princeton, uh, and what I loved about that was just being in the moment and trying to create a good theory, right? That's why I like was into debate, and it wasn't so much of the winning aspect. It was what kind of ideology can we create, and that's where like crypto was like the I don't want to use. I was about to use a outdated metaphor, but it was a total new frontier, where I could sort of like write about anything, and it would be somewhat novel, and that just gave me a lot of room to explore. Um, I feel like the first time where I really felt I was providing academically to the community, which I felt was like very rewarding to me personally, was around when I started tweeting and I made my first sort of like anti-Lido post. It was called The Case Against Lido. It started just in Discord, and it was when Lido first crossed Coinbase. When they became the number one staking entity, alarm bells were just going off like, this isn't stopping.
Mm.
And so I started researching, I started reading about, it's like how their registry worked, distribution of the LDO token, censorship risks, and uh, getting to talk about sort of like the philosophy while talking about cryptography with trading people, just sort of just brought everything together.
Yeah. So you mentioned Twitter, right? Like you're kind of like Rocketpool Community's resident like thread or like kind of person.
Right.
How does that work for you? Like what do you see your role in like that bridge between trading and crypto Twitter? Like how does that work for you?
We all owe Nashua a thanks for me even being on Twitter. It was back a while ago. Well, sorry, on Twitter to the extent I am now. Uh, when Twitter Space was something I always asked. When I used to, I don't know if you remember this, every like the start of every week, I would go in general and I would tag one of the team members and like, hey, hope you had a good weekend. So what happened last week? And sort of like ask for a recap of like the things in the protocol, which later it just got longer and longer and longer, turned into, I think, the biweekly update. So me and Ken would alternate sometimes tagging people in tagging the team in general to ask for this update. It's just sort of fortuitous that we ended up being the Twitter space host. But it did not happen until one day I was just saltily ranting and trading like one Twitter space, one marketing, when Nashua said, probably not until you just do it yourself. And it was just like, he's right. As Nashua almost 99.9% of the times is, he is right. And it's not even just he was right on the Twitter space, it's sort of like the more ideological sense, like I am capable of imparting some sort of effect onto Rocketpool if I just get up and do it. Right? Yeah. It wasn't just Twitter spaces, but like I could write about Rocketpool and my ideas might actually have an impact. So I really credit Nashua for like encouraging me to just do in Web3. I would really encourage everyone to, no matter how bad or silly you think of an idea is, just write it out, put it out there.
That's kind of like what happened with me with Rocket Fuel. So my wife was telling me for a while, you know, like start a YouTube channel. Like I think you'll be really good at it. You'll really enjoy it. And I'm like, I don't know what to talk about or what I'm going to do. Like it's completely like alien to me. She's like, talk about crypto. It's like, I don't know what crypto to talk about. And then I met Marceau and he was just like, do a Rocketpool video. And I was just like, yeah, I could do that. And then that was the beginning of Rocket Fuel right there. And it's exactly the same kind of thing, right? Like there's something there and you're not sure, like, you know that there's a gap, but you're not sure what it is or how it is. And then all of a sudden you're feeling it. It's like really valuable to the community. And it's kind of amazing that's happened. So tell me about like your kind of semi role with the team, like with these like Twitter spaces, and you get a part-time salary and stuff. Like how does that work? What are you? Who are you? Like, are you a community member? Are you a team member? Like what's going on?
You know, I bet if you ask the team, they wouldn't be able to answer you on a figure, like give you a good answer either. I will try to do my best. I sort of have a myriad of roles. Fortunately, given I've managed to get decently well connected into the DeFi space, I have some connections with like DeFi founders and stuff. So I end up doing some good biz dev work, right? I was a somewhat of an architect in the maker onboarding. Like I organized a big coalition of ecosystem players, mainly with the help of Daniel Wong from Stakefish. He sort of helped me like talk to Matt Lessinger, who is CEO at Alluvial, I believe, who was formerly a Lido node operator. So we sort of got a variety of industry heads together and we started talking about rETH and how we can really maximally get its adoption, which is really cool, right? We were getting like, because these are competing protocols, Stakefish and Alluvial, and they were talking to me about rETH adoption, right? So they were useful in sort of thinking about our ongoing liquidity strategy and also getting a good word with the MakerDAO community. So essentially I get to have some fun biz dev conversations where I learn alpha and then don't get to share it with the community. But it's really just because back in the day, right? I'm talking about like early 2022, January through March. I would just go into random discords that I thought a partnership would be viable between Rocketpool and them. And I'd be like, hey, have you considered Rocketpool for X, Y, and Z? Right. And then I would start talking to their devs and then I would connect their devs to the core devs. And just this ongoing process of making connections has allowed me to have like a good grasp on Rocketpool and to be able to help the team out and make. So I serve, like, I would say in the business dev sense, I just serve as a liaison. I like go out, find people who I think good partnerships would work with, and then connect them to the team. Or people reach out to me. And then whenever I can, I like to share it with the community. But as you can imagine, it's somewhat difficult.
And can you share some alpha with us today? Like when Chainlink, Jasper, or when Aave, because we've had some hints about those recently. Is there anything you can say that might be a little bit more than we know that you can share?
I will say Chainlink is very aware of us.
Yeah.
And we have made them very aware of us by connecting different protocols, and they are well aware of how many different protocols want rETH. Right? Yeah. So yeah, they're well aware. else.
Great. Okay. Thanks
But
for that little
the
tidbit.
CL feed is tricky because there is a set of hard requirements, which if they remain steadfast on that, that makes the timeline look one way. If they are not steadfast on that, that makes things look a different way. It seems I have no reason to believe it will be anything but the former, will it remain steadfast. And so if you just keep your eye on rETH exchange volumes, you would be able to guess when the CL feed would be live.
Yeah.
But we have to hit those hard caps first. And unfortunately, we sort of like hit a bear market, which destroys exchange volumes. But rETH is still doing incredibly well. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Soon TM.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is as well with rETH is people are now getting into like the withdrawals hype cycle. And there's a lot of hype about LSDs. And that's what we're going to be talking about later as well, about LSDs. But that will hopefully drive volume towards RPL, towards rETH, towards like this whole little like ecosystem we have. And maybe that will help us reach the criteria for getting that Chainlink feed. That would be really fantastic.
One important thing to keep in mind about the Chainlink feed is it's an instant supply multiplier, right? Because there's never been an efficient folding mechanism for rETH. There's going to be coming up like MISO finance, which is fixed rate. And there's also, I think, vendor finance, where you can also do the same thing, but on Arbitrum. So once we get this sort of one-click folding, that instantly we can expect like at least a 33% increase in supply just from passive folding, which means we have to be wary about when we want it to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine we had a Chainlink article 2 months ago. That'd be bad.
Yep.
Like we simply were not able and would not have been able to meet that demand. So in some ways, it is a silver or a hidden blessing that Chainlink Oracle has taken so long, simply because just imagine with me for a second, we get LED8s, CL feed, withdrawals all in a row. Like I have no reason to believe this happened, but just imagine, right?
Yeah, it would be like, amazing. It would be really, really great. And this is like the kind of like thesis that I've been pushing over the last few months is like, you know, this hype ladder where we have like bullish events after each other, like just kind of building up that hype, going up. Like, you know, we had Coinbase and then like audits go through and everything's good. And then LEB8s come in, Chainlink comes in, Aave comes in, withdrawals come in, and then we get SAS, and then we get LEB4/2s at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like this next year, well, especially the next 3 or 4 months, there's a lot of potential for like extremely bullish things happening right one after each other. And it's an extremely exciting time to be in the Rocketpool community. And it kind of like know this open secret. Like it feels like, you know, that meme where the guy's in the corner and people are kind of hooking up with each other and he's saying, you know, I know this thing that they don't know. It kind of feels like that, you know, where it's like we have this hidden knowledge and nobody else kind of knows. But it's really, really exciting. Definitely. I'm really excited.
Let's take that meme format. So like we have Rocketpool standing in the corner on their phone, like, I'll be on Aave, or my CL Oracle will be live soon, and I'll be able to be fold. And you have like Aave and Steve or Lido making out in the corner. Everyone knows it's so true. And just one point I want to drive home.
Yeah.
Who was the Aave person that was in Rocketpool? What was his name?
Mark Zell.
He's very high up. At CTO at Aave.
Oh wow.
He is very high up.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
And he's essentially, if you just look at his tweets, he's made it very clear. As soon as the CL Oracle is live, like it'll be 1, 2, 3 before the token is on Aave.
See, this is the great reason why you're here, because we need some of this like alpha, not alpha, you know, like this is the stuff that people want to hear. This is fantastic stuff that you're sharing. So let's kind of like delve into this a little bit more, right? Like, so you're kind of like the DeFi expert in the community, in a sense. Like you kind of know how. There are other people too, you know, I'm not gonna like dismiss other people, of course, but I feel like the community kind of
way more better. I mean, Nashua is miles better at this stuff than I am.
Sure, no, but I feel like the community kind of looks for you to like know what all these different protocols are, what all these different integrations are. Like you were telling people about ribbon finance, you were telling people about all this other stuff that was happening, like rETH integrations that were taking place. Like, how do you see your role in like being like an evangelist for rETH integrations? Like what's going on there?
Yeah, it's sort of it's definitely a responsibility, right? Like when I posted about the covered cultible, I made sure that I didn't just say like, "Hey, look at this high APR. Go dump your tokens in," right?
Mm.
When I posted about it, I made sure to like do a full thread on options. Like you very well could lose your principal by depositing into it. So I take the responsibility very seriously.
Yeah.
I think people definitely do look to my explanations to try to understand like what they can do in the ecosystem. And I think Valdorf especially has made this a lot easier by
Yeah.
like creating by handling a tons of questions in general. Fun fact, Valdorf has 5,000 answers responses in general. I think that's crazy just because there's just the percentage of activity in general that is just pure intro noob Q&A.
Yeah.
It just means Valdorf has just a ton of that stuff. So huge shout out to Valdorf,
But
especially
sorry, carry on.
especially on DeFi stuff, right?
Yeah.
Tons of a lot of people who are in Rocketpool are there because they think of it as the safest, the simplest, and most secure, which does not tend itself towards yield farming, right?
Yeah.
And so I knew back during the Curve pool when I launched that, like I had to release also a safe aping paper, right? Because I realized that our community is not a DeFi community. It's a validating community. It's a network server hoster community. Like we have admins. We don't have hedge funds.
Yeah.
Well, now we do.
Yeah. So I'm going to definitely ask you about that too. But tell me about the Curve paper, like the Curve pool era. Like what was going on there? What was the need for the Curve pool? What is the Curve pool for those who might not know? And how was that like the first real piece of DeFi integration that happened for Rocketpool? Like what was all that about?
Yeah, it was also the first major writing piece I did for crypto. So this is the idea was first mentioned by Marceau in February of 22. And he just threw out, like, what if we had a liquidity pool with stETH and rETH? And comments sort of like got glazed over, but I was like, wait, we need to talk about this. And I kept bringing it back up, and I was like, no, this is genuinely like going to change things.
Yeah.
Right. At the time, back then, stETH was the only LSD token pretty much with any kind of liquidity, and it was also the center of almost all yield farming, especially post bull market peak. Right. Prior to the bull market, you had tons of like really stupid yield farms like Titan and all these Ponzi's, Wonderland, right? But after the peak, capital has a way of like going in opposite flow. Like once capital is pouring in, you can do all these Ponzi's. Once it's pouring out, they don't work anymore. You have to go back to something sustainable. And at the time, the only sustainable yield really was like lending and staking. So stETH, specifically the Yearn stETH curve ball, was the king of DeFi. And so what is this? So at the time, the major DeFi token was a wrapped version of stETH that had been deposited into a Curve LP. It was half stETH, half ETH, and so it would facilitate trading. And this is to this day probably the deepest LP in all of crypto, excluding Ethereum itself. But they were dumping at the peak of the bull market in 2021. Lido was spending $20 million a month on incentives in this pool, right? So you had billions of dollars invested just farming this yield. And when Rocketpool supply had grown sufficiently by February, March, we became able to sort of like think about our own integrations. Yeah. So what's special about the idea? Why rETH wrapped stETH? Well, they're both, non-rebasing value accruing tokens. They both go up against ETH over time. So if you LP them together, the major concern with any LP usually is impermanent loss. When the price of two assets diverge, you lose money. If you can have two assets that just both go up and stay together, and then you can just very safely provide liquidity and take all the exchange fees. So there were a few major step forwards with the rETH rETH pool. First was that there was no IL. It was sort of an IL free pool, which meant you could really get a lot of capital in there safely. The second one was that it was full reward bearing. Both sides of the LP were going to be providing you yield, which is a game changer. So I talk about why, but so when you have the original curve pool, they're spending $20 million a month to boost the APY to about 6% for everyone. Like that's their target, slightly above natural ETH staking yield, and the market sort of balances out. Like the TVL covers that. That's the APY that the market demands. What ends up happening, that means, is that Lido's protocol has to cover half that cost.
Yeah.
Like they pay for 50% of that fee. When with our ETH, we can cut that out. We can have almost the entire ETH staking yield, and then any incentives that are on top of that are just pure bonus, pure extra yield, right? So it's just instantly nearly twice as capital efficient as any other existing Ethereum-based staking pool. And once that clicked, I was like, okay, we got something that's really could be huge, an ETH neutral staking pool, and even without incentives, right? We were just talking about like purely as a concept, this could be really useful because it's liquidity that's very cheap for Rocketpool. As a nascent protocol, we want to get deep liquidity as cheaply as possible so that people can move in and out. And we could do it what they did. We could have had an rETH LP on Curve, and the natural pool would actually probably have very little use. Like if it wasn't incentivized, why would you use it instead of holding natural rETH? So we were not going to get any natural demand for that. Whereas the Curve pool with rETH rETH, to this day, it's huge. There's so much natural demand because, again, it's IL free, you're getting full staking rewards, and you're getting trading fees. Plus, some people might like that it's, to some degree, spreads out your risk. You have approximately 77% rETH and 23% Lido in there, right?
Yeah.
So it's a basket product as well.
It's a great product.
So, right. So that all came together, and then we were like, okay, we can now, we have a great idea. Let's put it into practice. And we can do this ourselves. We don't need the team, right? There's no reason we need the team for this. And we didn't include the team. We just sort of like went out and we're like, okay, what do we need to do to build the Y curve stETH opponent, like the proper like counter? We need to get a curve pool. We need to get a curve gauge. We need to get a convex gauge. And we need to get a yearn pool. And then we need to get someone to bribe. And then we need to tell the world, right? And within a month, we did all 6 of those things to perfection.
It was amazing.
So we got, so me and Marceau sort of did all the transactions to get the pools live, get the gauge live. Then Nashua and I and a few other people sort of got to work on what the pool should actually be parameter-wise. And this was really tricky. This took us a little while. And we ended up copying the convex curve pool. So they had a similar, at the time, depeg to, or sort of gap between the two assets. And they had a natural floating point. It fit really well. So we just decided to copy it, and it worked great. So we had the pool parameter set up. We had the pool set up. Next, we needed to figure out bribes. The team wasn't going to bribe it, and we knew that, right? But Tetranode had recently aped in, or no, at the time it was
been
not
in for a couple of months at that point.
He had been in for a while.
That was when he was starting to get a little bit dissatisfied with the lack of DeFi integrations.
Liquidity incentives.
Liquidity incentives. So it was his charity, right? Why didn't you explain his charity to the Rocketpool community? Yeah,
so we hit him up. You can read about this in Discord. I tag him into the rETH liquidity incentives or Tetranode theory crafting thread. I'm like, hey, so we thought of something new, and we think this is going to be huge. We created the pool. We explained the concept to him, and he was like, this is brilliant. Sure, I'll support you. And then here's where we fucked up a little bit. We asked him to support us. Just like the way I wrote it was like, if you could bribe us a little bit. I don't remember exactly what, but I did not ask him to do what he did next, which was turn around and immediately lock in the entirety of his voting power, the single largest curve whale in all of Ethereum, at the time, $1 billion DeFi juggernaut,
Yeah.
into the new nascent rETH stETH pool before it had even been live.
It went crazy.
It was a monster from the get-go.
Yeah.
It was a monster. It hit $200 million at valuation at its peak. $200 million in capital coming. It lived up to the hype. I wanted it to be like a competitor to the Y curve of Yearn stETH pool. I mean, it was a magnitude of order off, but
yeah,
that's closer than I ever fucking thought.
Of course.
Sorry for the language, but
no, it's apt.
It exceeded. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote so Tetranode was donating, his charity was the equivalent of $20,000 worth of curved bribes per 2 weeks.
Yeah.
This was when curve efficiency was high, the market was still in a bullish mania. So like immediately RE pool maxes out and the peg breaks for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And we go over peg, and then the legend, the man, the beacon chain himself steps up, Thomas G. Actually, let me step back for a moment. First, I tag Langers into one of the threads, and I'm like, okay, we got to prep. This is going to be insane. Sorry, Tetranode cannot reduce his bribes.
Yeah.
His bribes were set.
In. Exactly.
He was locked in.
Yeah.
There's no going back. We knew we had about 2 weeks to prep for like 100 million. Like I don't remember what I quoted. I think I quoted him like 25 to 50 million. I expected capital to come in, and I was like, have fun. Try to get us some Nova operators, please. Go. My exact phrasing was like, now is the time for marketing, I think.
Yeah.
And the only reason the peg didn't go to like 2 ETH or something was because Thomas G just started printing pools.
It was amazing.
I think like 10,000 ETH worth of pools in a week. 800.
Well, I think he already had a big chunk of pools, but he brought up his total pools up to 800 at that point. At that point, the commission was variable, right? So as the pool was full, it was 20% commission. So anytime it hit 20%, he was like spinning up those pools to get those like high percentages. And he went crazy with his pools. He became the beacon chain, which was absolutely amazing. And
this was also the first sort of like parabolic growth moment for the protocol since launch. Like we had the launch parabolic movement, and things really tapered out for a long time, and then the curve pool hits and it's just vertical. The protocol TVL just explodes.
It's only happened one time since then as well, around withdrawals, right? When people were going in, and we had that huge bullish moment, and we hit all-time high in the RPL price, and that was on the graph. That was the only other point where it had that similar kind of progression. And I'm hoping that we'll get that again in the next few months, like over the next few months. But the community was hugely bullish about the possibilities of DeFi at that point, right? Like, because we were seeing all this playing out in front of us. One of the things that you mentioned was the team kind of made it clear that they didn't want anything to do with liquidity incentives. Like, why do you think they had that hesitation?
I've spent many a night talking to the team about this question. They have a very philosophy first, application second worldview, which is exactly what we need, but it also has some moments where it's going to conflict with the community, right? Philosophically speaking, liquidity incentives are bad. It's temporary illiquidity that won't last, right? They had to be convinced that this temporary bad thing could be a temporary bad thing that we would not be then entitled to stay with forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that ever truly got across. I think the thing that really sort of won them over was that the community felt it had an obligation to rETH holders to provide a liquid coin that was not being provided. Like the slippage on rETH was just too high to be a liquid staking product. I think that personally is what more so won them over. And we succeeded. You can do a $20 million rETH trade with like less than 2% slippage, which is insane.
Yeah.
But it was a very long, slow process where tons of people just made had to very carefully articulate their stances on why, although liquidity incentives are sometimes mercenary capital, they, in the net long run, are going to be key. one of the important things is, which I don't want to say I hold this over the team's head, but I kind of do. Check out how important the curve pool still is with like no incentives. Like in theory, TVL should have gone to zero, right? But no, this is a still massive pool that still contributes to a huge amount of our whatchamacallit, like when a trade happens, trading volume, right?
Yeah.
So I think that also was important, them seeing that sometimes mercenary capital isn't actually going to be mercenary, that we have enough value-driven holders that just want some DeFi opportunity that they'll stick in around.
So we're kind of like moving a little bit all over the place now, but I'm going to try to thread all these things together. Like in the last few months, we've got the IMC, right? And like, you just mentioned 20 million sell/buy with 2% movement, which is absolutely amazing. How do you feel like the IMC's kind of taken over that, like basically like a tiny shoot of an idea from the curve pool, and now doing all this great stuff with Balancer and all these other protocols as well? Like, how's that looking to you?
One of my favorite moments as a Rocketpool member was getting to write the first draft of RPIT 10. It was, I think 10 and 11. It was first the general structure and then the IMC application. Obviously with the help of tons of people as we were drafting this, but it was like writing philosophy. I mean, it's just what I did with writing when I wrote the curve pool. Is I'm putting ideals into words that'll help guide future decisions. I put ideals into words about how rETH is a superior product and how it should be a DeFi staple when I published about the curve pool, and it was well received. With the IMC, the principles I wanted to instill are that we have a duty as a protocol, we are a two-sided protocol, that we have a solid duty to rETH holders to provide a liquid staking token, right? And that requires some sacrifice from the protocol, like in the form of incentives or a committee built around that. And there was a few other important ideas that I really wanted to make sure got in there, including that the IMC will never provide incentives that do not provide useful liquidity. So this is a tricky one. It's like, say we had, this is a balancer whale that likes to make very niche pools with their own custom tokens just to farm incentives, right? And that's something that's clearly not good. Like Balancer, the core team hates that this whale is doing it, and they've since reached agreements because it's clear, right? It's a misaligned use of incentives. I did not want that to happen in the IMC, so I sort of like wrote in this: if the incentives that are being like considered do not have this external use beyond just being incentives, beyond just rETH value accrual, then it shouldn't be included. And I think that's actually been useful as we've considered some various integrations that have come our way.
Nice.
Yeah, it's certainly.
What do you think tell me about some of the integrations that have happened and like how they've taken shape over the last couple of months? Because you were the treasurer for a while, right? Like you were writing.
First treasurer.
Yeah, the interim treasurer from the beginning, which was wonderful.
Yes.
Now we have Raka, who's the treasurer. But how was that like that experience and kind of like staying on top of everything that's happening with the IMC?
It was honestly pretty easy at the beginning because when the IMC first started, we were like, okay, we just want a simple plan to increase liquidity, and we weren't considering partnerships at the time. And from like our basic understandings of how liquidity markets work, we knew that roughly, as well as like substantial previous discussion with the team about what the options are, we wanted to bribe, and we probably wanted to do the balancer ecosystem.
Yeah,
we considered bribing the wrapped stETH rETH pool on curve, but we didn't want to introduce the tail risks of wrapped stETH into our holders, right? We didn't want to incentivize people to be Lido exposed. That sort of runs counterintuitive to the IMC's goals or the Rocketpool's goals.
We kind of got stung a little bit by the curve pool, right? With the 3AC collapse and then Lido's huge depeg kind of hurt us too. We depegged too, not as hard, of course, but I think we got hit in a way that we wouldn't have if that curve pool didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right in saying that.
No, definitely. Yeah, definitely, sure. Because the curve pool, when stETH fell off a cliff, there was an arbitrage loop available, right? You could get rETH, or you could get stETH. You could trade your discounted stETH for above value rETH, and then sell down on the open market, and get more stETH, and then trade for rETH and sell on the open market. So the day of, absolutely, we probably had like 20% of the curve's TVL that day as sell pressure.
Yeah, which was really bad. So
And
want to avoid that by not going
right,
into bed with WSTETH again.
right,
So
yeah,
balancer was the way we went, right? And I think that's worked out really well so far.
phenomenally. We're
Yeah.
one of the biggest bribers on the Aura ecosystem. So we're pretty cognizant of like one of the big useful thing about mercenary liquidity style using bribes is that we as the DAO can also be very mercenary. Like we are today even just discussing about what percent should we have as Aura bribes versus balancer bribes. So yeah, it's going over really well. We've gotten huge liquidity depth, and now we can also start playing with different trials. Like I really loved the Gamma trial that we did with
And
Uniswap V3.
today's news that came through with Gamma
Right,
back into
right.
range. So
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
I think especially post withdrawals, we might make a bigger pivot towards Uniswap V3. It's just the scenarios in which you have liquidity demand outside of a very tight range right now is huge, right? Like obviously our ETH was just 2% over peg. Post withdrawals, that range is going to crunch.
Yeah. It's really exciting. So we talked about, those parabolic movements a little while ago, but I mentioned the merge parabolic movement, but that it can be argued as actually the IMC's parabolic
It was
movement.
right at the same time.
It was happening at the same time, right? So you can kind of misattribute cause and effect there, I think. But I was definitely championing that it was the IMC's win, and it was an amazing. Once the incentive started, I feel like that excitement in the community was palpable because people were just like, wow, I can actually do stuff with my rETH now. Like I can put it in balancer pool, I can send it to Optimism and put it into Beefy and through Beethoven.
And die against it.
Exactly. And there's just been some really, really great stuff that's happened over the last few months. And that's really, really great, I think. What do you think is going to happen now? Like, I guess now's a good time to kind of transition towards your recent thesis that you wrote, right? Like, why Paradigm was wrong, how rETH will flip stETH. So this is like a 50-page paper you wrote, like a magnum opus, even, I think, just talking about how, the shortcomings of Lido and stETH, the issues that it faces, and then, your the pivots towards championing Rocketpool. It goes on to explain some of the other staking derivative tokens out there right now. And then at the end, it kind of ties it all together with a little bit of understanding of, what Rocketpool's shortcomings might be, but also why we can overcome them and how we can thrive going forward. So tell me, when did you get the idea for writing this paper? Because I feel like these are thoughts that you've been grappling with for over a year now, right? Like, I know.
Yeah.
How was the process of writing this paper?
Yeah, arguably the first draft of this is what I mentioned earlier in our chat, the case against Lido. That, it's funny. Superfizz pushed back when I first wrote that. He didn't want to paint an enemy, and he still didn't like painting enemies, right? He'd rather build up than tear down. It's totally acceptable. But I still believe in this case that it is important that unfortunately we have to tear down a little just for the sake of honesty. So the ideas really did start back then. Like Lido is going to grow unabated. They don't have enough node operators. They literally cannot grow decentralized under the current scheme unless they completely redo themselves. And so those are the warning signs back then. And that was like April of 2022. Fast forward, I would say, to about August. I had missed writing. Like one of the things I love about philosophy is just writing is cathartic to me. Being able to create like complex just theory. Just write it out and then share it with people and understand things together is just rewarding and beautiful to me.
Yeah.
So it was just a play project. I've never like intended this to become 50 pages. I would get bored at night and be like, okay, I hate this paradigm paper so much. Like, I cannot express how much I hate it. Let me try. I honestly cannot express just how long that paradigm paper sat in the back of my head, like just like kind of mocking me, like, haha, there is no academic response to us. We've been sitting out in the open for years and no one has said anything. And it was kind of like the Nashville moment. I just had to write it myself.
So
And
let's talk a little bit about the aftermath of the paper, and then we can actually discuss the paper itself. So
sure.
what happened? Like the moment you wrote your tweet thread and you put it out there, the paper was ready, people had seen drafts of it, you'd already been sharing like paragraphs here and there, like, you know, late night trading, people like sharing things with them. Once it was out there in the world, what happened?
It was like immediate, like people loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you very much for very quickly after publication putting out a full recording, literally nearly 2 hour marathon, a fairly dense material. Thank you to your lungs for managing the feed.
I had a coughing fit an hour and a half into that. Like I literally coughed for a minute straight, and Maverick thankfully like took the audio from me and kind of cleaned it up a little bit and sent it back because it was a lot. Like there was a lot. It was a lot of speaking and my throat just couldn't handle it. But you can hear my voice getting more hoarse as the reading goes on. But I think
so I publish it.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So I publish it, and it starts picking up traction. There was like a 25 tweet thread accompanying with it, which I actually still owe 2 more entire tweet threads because I only summarized part of the paper.
Yeah, because it says 1 of 82 on tweet 2, and I was like,
did I leave the 82?
Yeah.
Oh, oops.
I didn't tell
it was an
anyone.
82 tweet thread.
Yeah.
So I've already written the thread. I just need to actually put it together now.
Yeah, do it. Okay, so it goes out there. People respond positively. What happened next?
So the moment I was like, this is really going well, was when people started tweeting it in like so many languages. Vietnamese, Japanese, French, Filipino, German, Korean, Chinese.
Yeah, Korean,
yeah. So many, everywhere. And it was gratifying. It was like humbling. Like, oh my God, people all over the world are reading this and they're enjoying it.
It was really great.
It amassed sitting at like 175,000 views now.
Nice.
So it got pretty big. And you know, I don't want to say that it was all my doing, but not very long after I put that out there, we did have the whole LSD wide market surge.
Yep, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I'd be like, Jasper, you got to get on here because we need to talk about this right now, right? Because there's definitely like a huge resurgent interest, and like obviously there's all these different things that are happening, you know, with the Ethereum protocol, you know, heading into withdrawals and Atlas, and well, especially withdrawals, I guess for the ecosystem at large. But it came at just the right time. Like your paper definitely, I think, might have been like a Tinder like little flame spark there, right? And this is a conversation that's really taken hold now. Have people been asking you about it? Like, what have people been saying to you?
Oh, constantly. Yeah, I've gotten so many DMs of people like asking questions about the paper, just sending their praise or saying thank you. I have also had people in fancier roles, so to speak, express their gratitude and how it has influenced their decision making. Interpret that how you will.
Hedge funds, VCs. Yeah, you are second only to Maso in that tease that you guys do. It's like, I know this thing that I'm not telling you all.
You know, I love when occasionally being able to send really obscure messages into trading that have alpha in them, but like you would have to do so many leaps in logic to figure it out.
Yep.
So if I send a message in trading that looks like pure gibberish, maybe look a little closer.
Yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind because, of course, I read everything in trading, so I'll definitely pay attention to that more. But so now let's actually dive into the paper a little bit and
Sure.
have a look at like what you kind of argued, right? So in the beginning of the paper, the first chapter is like power is not law, and
Mhm.
in here you talk about the Pareto principle. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about what that is and how it applies to Lido?
Yeah,
And
this is sort of me actually.
sorry to interrupt you. Let's not.
Mhm.
We don't have to get too much into the details of it. We
Yeah.
can keep it fairly high level. That's fine.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about bio and like how natural systems work. Like you have a predator that like grows, then it gets too big, and then it has to shrink down, like some opposing pressure. And that opposing pressure, like the force that thing causes things to contract, was missing in Ethereum staking. Like stETH was able to grow, as I described it in my first paper. It's like this black hole, it's just sucking in all the ETH, and growing endlessly. But that's not how natural systems work.
Hmm.
We're not in a Pareto distribution right now. Lido can grow and it cannot shrink. And that is going to change. And that's going to fundamentally revert back to a Pareto distribution in which we have more of an oligopoly. We have multiple players vying for the top spot.
Yeah. So that's how you start the paper, right? And then
Hmm.
then the next part of the paper was about social headwinds to the stETH growth. So
Right.
what kind of things were you talking about here? Like, what did you mean by governance attackable? Like that was one of the sections that you had in the paper.
Right. So one of the big things that's important about Ethereum staking is whoever controls the validators in a loose way. Sorry, not the validators. Actually, yes. I'm going to restart this. What's important when you think about governance for Ethereum is that there is no base layer Ethereum governance, right? There's the all core devs call, but there's no governing token. There's no voting. There's no on chain governance. However, there is staking and there are staking protocols, and those protocols are governed. And you can get a divergence. You could have the all core devs and the community who have a certain set of ideals, and you can get protocols that control parts of the ecosystem have differing views. And that's attack surface.
Hmm.
Governance is attack surface, right? The ability to express opinions on the base layer inherently means you also have things that can be attacked. So the LDO distribution is not ideal. Further, LDO is borrowable and then immediately can be used in governance. Those two things alone are very scary.
Yeah.
Uh, the dragonfly vote is what I talk about, but it's really just an example that Lido governance can be attacked because the token is not very well distributed and it's available to be borrowed, and so the amount of capital required and the trade-offs are there.
Yeah. That's
Whereas Rocketpool, for example, quadratic voting and the very high barrier to entry, you have to be a node operator, completely different.
yeah, and you have to stake your RPL, right, to be able to vote
That's
in
right.
the
Mm-hmm.
PDAO, which means that you can't withdraw up to 150%. I guess once withdrawals are enabled, you can technically spin up those pools and vote and then unspin them, but it's just a lot more difficult. There's a lot more friction to it than there is with Lido voting.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you would still need the ETH capital. You would need the ETH
Hmm.
and the RPL for validators, which is much, much more difficult than just going into a flash loan, even
Yeah.
in some cases.
Yeah. So then the paper goes on, you talk about the rapidly changing fee and incentive structures. So we
Mhm.
kind of talked about the incentives before, about how they were, incentivizing their pools by $20 million a month. I don't
Mhm.
think they're spending that much on their incentives now, right?
No,
But they're
two
still,
million a month.
yeah, they're still spending a fair amount. How has that
But
changed and why is that an issue?
in this section, I was actually talking more about the Lido protocol takes a cut from staking rewards.
Mm,
10%, 5% goes to validators, the node operators, and then 5% is sort of like up to the protocol to control. And when Lido first launched, part of that ETH was going into an insurance fund.
hmm.
It is no longer going to an insurance fund, it's just going into a treasury fund.
Yeah.
And so if half the protocol's revenue can be switched from insuring stETH to making money for LDO holders, that's a distinct weakness, or at the very least, it is a sign that the system is very malleable.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next part of the paper, you talk about the multi-chain dilemma, that the the Lido is basically on Solana, it's on all these other staking services. Like, why is that an issue, do you think?
I think the best way to think about this is to think about the worst case scenario, like doomsday for crypto. We have a bunch of chains going down, and we have one really rich VC-backed, government-backed, maybe even a chain that's willing to pay, like for this temporary amount of time, whatever it takes for its validators to get back online.
Yeah.
If those validators who are for-profit, or these node operators who are for-profit entities, they're probably going to be willing to take these bribes for better work, right? So if they are willing to, then you have this clear perverse incentive structure where outside factors that pertain to one blockchain can force that blockchain to have a superior role to Ethereum. Yeah. So just by the nature of having two blockchains with one node operator, you're just instantly adding risk. And Rocketpool is inherently an Ethereum first, like node operators have the option of hosting on multiple entities, but I guarantee you the vast majority of its Rocketpool node operators are not.
Yeah, and then the next, of course, they're not, because the other delegated staking systems, their thresholds are so high that there's very few people who are even able to run those staking services, right? So that's not the crowd that Rocketpool targets in the slightest. Like our goals are to get home stakers involved, like small stakers. Literally, like, we're working towards mini pools with people staking with 2 ETH. Like, that's not the kind of people who are staking on Solana. So
would you say that the social ethos of Ethereum is to favor decentralized home stakers? And would you say Rocketpool agrees with it on that?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Would you say that is Lido's driving principle?
No, because Vasily sat
exactly.
Vasily sat at DevCon and said that we're all hobbyists and amateurs, and we should leave it to the professionals, which was a huge slap in the face at a panel about home staking and opening it to more stakers. It was horrible.
The TLDR of this chapter was Vasily at that panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just completely misaligned. The next thing you talked about was the validator registry and the issues around that. Can you explain what that was a little bit?
Yeah, so this is just like how node operators can join. And something I didn't talk about in this paper, I just talked about how Lido's permission, Rocketpool, anyone can join as a node operator. What's important for people who are listening to this to know is there have been Rocketpool community members that have tried and failed to become Lido node operators, like really good node operators, people who have the experience, who would have done phenomenally. And when Lido onboards new node operators, they'll get 40 applications, they might accept 8, right? Why? It boggles the mind to me. When you want to minimize risk as a protocol, you want to grow your node operator base to avoid all the social pressures we talk about. How can you accept so few when you have so many good applicants?
They want people that they can control, right? Like, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. So yeah.
There are many questions abound about Lido's node operator registry, and it is a curse to the ecosystem currently.
Yeah. So the next chapter then becomes the economic headwinds to stETH growth. So it's a staking risk-free or risk-fee. So what were some of the ideas that you were having in this section?
This is, I think, my novel contribution. Like, we have this concept of the staking pegs, right? We have rETH at consistently over a premium, we have stETH at its discount, and we have CVE at its discount. What I wanted to do was sort of try to break down what elements are there to these pegs. Like, when you have a discount or a premium, we can think about it being broken down into different things that contribute to it. And when I did that mental exercise, I was thinking like, okay, what are economic incentive structures that would be relevant here? And I came up with execution risk, tail risk, and centralization risk.
Yeah.
So broadly, and I tried to like support this with graphical and numerical evidence where I could. Execution was the easiest one to prove. Like, the idea is there is a portion of any LSD token's discount that is purely based on things the protocol has to get done. Like, merge has to ship, withdrawals has to ship. These are sort of like broad systemic things that have to get done, and once they do finish, create de-risking events. And we saw this, right? The merge happened, LSDs across the board, all their pegs cut in like half. So I use that as evidence. Okay, at least part of it is execution risk. I made the claim that post merge, rETH execution risk was essentially zero, or roughly, along with other decentralized tokens, which there were none at the time.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, what's left? Why is stETH still trading at a discount relative to rETH when we're now like months after the Three Arrows capital collapse? Like, if the market wanted stETH to return to peg, it could, right? The day of the merge, the stETH dpeg cut in half. Like, there is enough volume for the dpeg to disappear. Why hasn't it? So tail risk is broadly like the different ways a protocol could end up losing the money. Mass slashing event. In Lido's case, like, it gets slashed by the Ethereum core developers for getting too large. Quadratic leaks, things that are quite rare. Like, fundamentally, a tail risk event is very rare, but are important to keep in mind.
And we saw
and Lido.
Sorry, carry on. I was saying we saw signs of that with the Bridge Tower Capital incident, right?
Right.
Around Bellatrix, and it was a scheduled
professional node operator.
Exactly, like it was a scheduled hard fork. Everyone knew exactly what block it was taking place. Well, terminal difficulty was taking place. There was no reason for them to lose 7,800. I think, was it 7,800 validators went offline?
Validators.
Yeah, is that's something that shouldn't have happened, right? And it happened. Yeah. So it's definitely an issue there. Sorry, carry on. You were going to explain the tail risk issue a bit more.
Yeah, so Lido, just inherent to its structure of being permissioned with such a few limited node operator set, opens up to tail risk that Rocketpool just doesn't have. I mean, if the US government and the European Union wanted to go in and shut down Lido node operators, they would get a huge chunk. Like, and that same action, while it could impact the Oracle DAO a little bit, would not be able to touch our node operator base.
Yeah.
Hodja, HODJA, from the Discord and on Twitter, just put up a beautiful heat map that shows how distributed our node operators are. And like, you would have to have the whole world government team up.
Yeah.
That's so much more tail risk resistant.
Absolutely, which is great. And then you talked about centralization risk. Can you explain a little bit about what that was?
Yeah. That's just like, the bigger a protocol gets, the more risk it's going to bring in with it. Like Lido at 50% of the Ethereum network, if they only have still 40 node operators and one of them loses all their ETH, you just lost the entire DeFi ecosystem, right? Like, once they are size, like Lido size is size, and that is bad, because once your size is size, you get cascading liquidations, you get bad debt in DeFi protocols, and it could become very bad. Like, we saw parts of this in the Three Arrows collab. Like, stETH was one of the major things that led to the whole ecosystem tanking.
Yeah, it was really bad. So now you mentioned the word cascade. Now the paper transitions from here to the orange cascade, which was definitely my favorite section of the whole paper. I really loved it. So you started off by talking about how Rocketpool kind of creeps pre-withdrawals, and kind of explain kind of where we are now, right? So can you just tell us a little bit about that part of the paper?
Yeah, so in the pre-withdrawal era, I'm sort of just setting up the scene as it is now, and it will lead into withdrawals. And so the major thing in this section is going to be the LEB8s. There for a period of time, we were also considering maybe we got stats before withdrawals, but obviously the timeline has changed. So with LEB8s, we have the potential for a 3x multiplier on the rETH TVL, on top of cutting in half our requirement to become a node operator.
Yep.
Right. So just take those two together. We have a 3x multiplier and an approximate 2x multiplier. We can 6x roughly our rETH supply with one upgrade.
It's pretty amazing.
That alone gets us to like
600,000.
Roughly like 700,000. Yeah. And then we get to withdrawals, which is like the meaty bit. Because first off, we get node operator migration. And to me, node operator, solo staker node migration is going to be sort of the hidden factor that determines the rest of Rocketpool's future.
Yeah.
If we get a sizable node operator migration, solo staker migration, arguably we can abandon staking as a service. Like if we have a good migration, say even 10% to 20% of solo nodes, we're scaling into the millions of ETH with LEB8. So it's I want to impart that we don't need everything in this chapter. If we get some of this chapter, Rocketpool will succeed beyond our wildest imagination. Zero thesis will play out.
That's one of the points that I've been making for quite a while in Rocket Fuel, is that we can scale in the next year without adding a single new node operator, putting a single new ETH of their own staking, right? Because the case that I make is once we get to LEB2s, we will 15x our current rETH, the amount we can carry without adding a single new node operator ETH at all, right? Because you'd go down from 16 ETH to 2 ETH. Your 1 mini pool now would be 8 LEB2 pools, and each of those would be carrying 30 ETH each. Like the numbers go up to 2.25 million, 2.5 million, basically. That would put us at a very respectable chunk of the whole of the Ethereum staking environment as it currently stands, without even one single new ETH coming in from existing stakers. And that, when I try to rationalize that in my mind, it kind of like boggles my mind a little bit, because it's just so incredibly bullish to think of it like that. So when you add on top of that, a sizable migration of solo stake operators, the multiplication factor of that is astounding. And then the question I ask, and I don't think like this is kind of an aside, is where does the rETH demand come from? That's something that I've kind of grappled with, and I'm not sure if I have the answer for that yet, because I don't know how that's going to happen, right? We would be in a position where we could have a mini pool queue that's in the thousands of length, and what happens in that situation? I'm not sure.
There's so much. So the Rocketpool team and the IMC are currently doing their best to suppress rETH demand.
That's right.
We are literally lowering incentives. Like I have been on Twitter telling people not to buy rETH. What can I? So there is going to be probably with Atlas one bonus upgrade that no one is expecting around Atlas. I can't speak for the team, obviously, but based on some special discussions the IMC has had, there is one thing that people are not talking about, that people should be talking about, that is huge for rETH demand.
Is that something we know about that we're not paying attention to? Or is it something that's kind of clandestine that only IMC knows about?
Everyone is familiar with the concept.
So why don't you just explain it to us?
I don't want to put undue pressure on the team to release it, but and I don't also know. It is a category of things, and I do not know which which group within the category we will be with. I'm trying to be very broad, but I apologize.
To figure it out. Okay, that's fine. I'm sure you can say I told you back then, in a few months' time. So maybe we can start thinking about it in trading.
This conceptual thing, I think will bring 6 or 7 digits worth of rETH demand, either hundreds of thousands or million. Yes.
Nice. Okay.
Yes. So that is this thing. Then we have the entire Aave Chainlink folding ability, right? So if that comes up, remember when I described that, I said it was a multiplier on existing supply, right? So if our supply hits our 6x with just LEB8s and solo staker migration, before even stats or whatever, we just get that 6x. Then we get this built-in multiplier based on folding, which we don't even. So I said 33% earlier, right? We kind of don't know how powerful folding is going to be in the withdrawal world, right? Because
Maso has talked about, sorry for interrupting you, Maso has
Yeah.
talked about people folding up to like 50 times or some crazy number, like that, the potential of it exists because the peg will be so well defendable
Mhm.
because of withdrawals. It means
Yeah.
that, the peg won't deviate at all. And that
Right.
will mean that people can take bigger and bigger risks. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
if we want to invite that to happen, but in the way that you can't stop
It's a
that from happening.
permissionless world. Yeah.
Exactly, you can't stop
So
it.
Aave v3's system prevents excessive protocol leverage.
Mhm.
They have soft caps, right?
Okay.
LTV caps for 5 market.
Yeah.
Uh, Borrow rates are going to be the other thing that really eats into that. So I really don't think we're ever going to see 50% staking APR
Yeah.
withholding, just because the demand for borrowing is going to cause the fees and borrowing just to go sky high,
Mm.
like we saw for a little while right before Ethereum proof of work dropped. Like we saw borrow cost at Aave at like 3,000% APY.
Mm.
Like I simply don't see that being sustainable for the
Yeah.
leveraging loop. And then another important thing that hasn't been researched or like understood is you have a withdrawal queue, but that's not a liquidity pool. When you do on-chain liquidations, you can't use a withdrawal queue to liquidate. You need actual ETH on chain that's immediately usable.
Yeah.
So while it will make it a much less risky affair to do this arbitrage loop, it's not clear to what extent it reduces the requirement for on-chain liquidity, deep on-chain liquidity.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's going to be a complex world.
There's a lot,
Yeah,
there's a lot up in the air, definitely.
yeah.
So that this whole section of the paper is just so incredibly bullish. That there's a whole lot to cover as well. But let's kind of like move forward a little bit with, like, you're talking about the future with like staking as a service and DVT and how all that fits together. So what were some of your thoughts and ideas here?
So a little while ago, I wrote the paper, the layer zero bull case. And that was when I was like, okay, um, part of the reason I wrote this was because we had so much rETH in. I was like, I could release my Magnus Oath Bum, or I could start a different paper and talk about the node operator base because we need more node operators. So I just chose to go that route. And I was like, okay, Eigenlayer. Me and Sriram had interacted quite a bit on Twitter, going back like months and months. He had been he followed me like a long time ago because Rocketpool is actually kind of a stake rehypothecation service already. It's just very, very tailored towards rehypothecating stake to literally rehypothecate stake and create a liquid staking derivative. Whereas Eigenlayer is like the Turing complete language to enable stake rehypothecation. So I sat down and I was like, okay, we have the already built version in Rocketpool, and we have now this nascent aiming to be base layer version of it in Eigenlayer. What happens when they converge, or if they converge? And Sriram, CEO or something of Eigenlayer high ranking, has already talked about the mutual beneficiaries here. So Rocketpool by nature has a very decentralized node operator base. Eigenlayer can service node operator stake to different protocols that have requirements. Like you can do L2 sequencers, oracles, what have you, in theory. So they're a very natural fit because Rocketpool is sort of like this a purified staking ecosystem. Like the core of a validator set is already been isolated. And so now when you will need to market a validator set, you already have clear markers. And so this is where some of the mutual beneficials come in. Another important thing is that Eigenlayer requires you to be able to have your stake slashed. And like the Ethereum ecosystem can do an actual slashing, where part of the stake is actually lost. Eigenlayer can't do that. They can only mess with once you have their withdrawn.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this issue with Eigenlayer where if they have the user get slashed for like 16 ETH, they won't have actually lost the ETH. They'll just have lost the right to it, and they won't have any incentive to maintain the validator. Rocketpool also has this issue in theory, with MEV stealing. So we have a highish bond as well as RPL. So the RPL is actually quite important here. It's like an additional layer that can be directly slashed that the user provides. So I think in the most bullish world, we have an eigenlayer adopted into the smart node, where your RPL stake is actually your access point into the eigenlayer network on top of your base Ethereum stake.
It's really fascinating. It's incredibly exciting. And I've been like saying really loudly that like if we can, we should do whatever we can to like integrate Rocketpool with eigenlayer, because I think both protocols can help each other so much. It's absolutely fascinating to me that right now, as we stand, I think Rocketpool's set of node operators is like the 4th or 5th biggest in all of crypto, like behind Bitcoin and Ethereum and what are the other couple? I think like Zcash or something, and some other one.
Zcash probably has a lot. Yeah.
And then there's some 4th one, and then we're 5th. Basically, it's absolutely amazing. Just how much we've grown, and the scope for growth is even more tremendous in the coming months, which is pretty astounding. I don't know why, they wouldn't jump all over that, and they are jumping all over that. So it's really exciting.
I think I remember the first time Sriram interacted, and it was when I tweeted, when will we see the first L2 airdrop tokens to Rocketpool nodes to immediately bootstrap like a strong node operator set?
Yep.
And that's kind of just like the idea of eigenlayer, but instead of a airdrop of the tokens, you just opt into the eigenlayer network.
Yeah.
But as you said, tons of bullish catalysts coming, and it's like, which we have so many options in front of us. Which do we eat first? Do we go the DVT route? Do we go the STAS route? Do we go the eigenlayer route?
It's really exciting. It's truly exciting. But I think one of the things that we need is forced withdrawals, right? And that I think will unlock a lot of this stuff, that eigenlayer especially, and also of course LEB2s and 4s, which is what I think will be like the true like next level up for Rocketpool, in a way that even 8s won't quite do. 2s will just be absolutely mind-blowing. It's really exciting.
Part of me thinks we don't hit 2 until we get DVT incorporated.
Why do you think that is?
Because I'm wondering what we do with MEV stealing, even in the 4 world. Like once we have forced exits, like we have better coverage, but we still end up losing out in some cases. And I believe DVT actually is pretty good at stopping MEV theft.
Oh, nice. Okay, so that's still like at least a year away, right? So hopefully by then we'll have good these systems in place of dealing with that stuff. Take a whole bunch of time to think about it all. But
I got into a Twitter just a quick aside, it's pretty funny.
Please.
I got into a Twitter beef with Kobe a long time ago. Probably right around when I published my curve paper. And we were just going over it, and I was like, Lido's bad, look at all the node operators. He was like, Rocketpool can't scale, blah, blah, blah. And we got to the point where we were talking about SSV, DVT, and he was like, I made the case that Lido can't use SSV to scale fast enough. It just won't be ready in time. There's just too long of a period where Lido is just sitting unsecured as a risk. By that point, like Rocketpool is going to scale before they can decentralize. And he made the claim, this is Kobe, that SSV and DVT will be ready on mainnet much faster than we think. So we will see.
Indeed. The next part of your paper is kind of talking about the different staking tokens that are out there as well, like the other challenges. So there's CBETH, there's Frax ETH, there was Stakewise version 3, pretty much, and you kind of talk about the benefits and like, the problems with each of those in a sense. And then you kind of had like reflections of a Rocketeer section where we talk about some of the shortcomings of Rocketpool and like, shortcoming, not shortcoming type of thing, or how we can fix it. And finally, the paper finished with the chapter 6, the underappreciated art of counterparty tokenomics, where you were talking about how that all will work out as well. So the paper was absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I'm one of the few people probably who've read it more than once, which was
kudos to you.
Great. And I really, really enjoyed it. it was released at Christmas, so it was
Christmas Day.
nice present. I stayed up at night reading it until I just couldn't stay awake anymore, and then I finished it first thing in the morning, which was really cool. I love the paper. So what are you working on next? Do you have any ideas of papers that you'd like to write in the coming months, weeks, or years?
So a good friend of mine, who works at a suit and tie firm, wants to collaborate with me on a paper.
Okay.
So he is a AI ML modeling person, so who's currently working at a big hedge fund. So they will bring a pretty quantitative and economic view, and so we're going to talk and see what we can come up with.
That sounds amazing. I'm really
Yeah.
excited to read it. Or for you to share ideas in trading even about it, and for me to cover.
If you have suggestions for things you would like to see me write about, feel free to send them my way. I really, writing is just one of my like cathartic things to do at the end of the day. I will have trading open, I'll have ETH finance open, and I'll just type out my thoughts.
Yeah,
just let it flow.
that's wonderful. That's really great. Before we finish up, Jasper,
Yeah.
do you feel like there's anything that you want to cover before we wrap things up? There's so much that we could talk about. We didn't talk about the LEB8 max collateral vote, and how that was and how you kind of took the side of the rETH, right? Like that's the kind of case you were presenting. But maybe we can save that discussion for another time. Is there anything else that you think we should cover before we close this up?
I would like to finish by saying the progressive decentralization of Rocketpool is of paramount importance. And I think going into the back half of 2023, it should rise very quickly to the top of our list.
Yeah.
Like thinking about the numbers we just put out there when we were talking about that previous chapter, like millions of ETH under Rocketpool control means that we have to be good stewards of the beacon chain. We
Absolutely.
need to, obviously we're miles ahead of the competition, but like Reflections of a Rocketeer chapter is real. Like the ODAO has its flaws, and if we end up pushing on the upper bounds of our self-imposed soft caps, we should be doing so when we're in our best possible state, which is with a minimized ODAO, which is with potentially a second smart node, which is as secure and tail resistant as possible. The Guardian Act, just like the whole fiasco with that. I think scaling is a solved problem for Rocketpool. I'm going to put that out there.
Yeah.
We figured it out. Now we just got to do the rest.
Yeah, we got to do it responsibly, right? And make sure that we stay firm to those values that, we claim we hold, the maximal decentralization. Like we need to do that the best way possible. And we have a model for that, right? Like Ethereum has given us a model for that. Like we have clients, multiple clients on the execution side, multiple clients on the consensus side. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't have multiple smart node stacks going forward. Definitely. That's something really.
Maybe a second team to contribute smart contract changes.
Yeah. Maybe we can write a bounty about it next year.
I think when RPL is 10x the market cap, there's a whole field of possibilities unlocked.
Absolutely. Yeah. If the inflation is the same as it is now, and the price goes up rapidly, the amount of amazing things we'd be able to fund as a PDAO would just go through the roof. We could literally hire an army of engineers to work on this for us. Like it would be truly, truly amazing. And it'd be community, right? Like not just the team. It would be ours. We'll be taking the protocol into our own hands, which I think is really important. So it's really
I'm going to say something controversial here.
Of course.
We actually have a lot to learn from Lido. Their governance structure, their forum and their governance, it's pretty well structured. Like their calls, I recently posted about Lido's new format. Like the way they had the call and the documentation around that, great. Like we should aspire to that. Like they have very good transparency around DAO happenings. It's just not built into their protocol.
Yeah.
Which is sad. But we have it built into our protocol. Now we just need to build it into our governance too.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that goes. Jasper, I want to thank you so much for coming on Launchpad, sharing your fascinating thoughts, and like I feel like, you know, people have known you in the community for so long, but now they get to see you and they get to hear your thoughts from you directly. And I think that's going to be really valuable for everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I feel like you're a brother from another mother. This has been a great conversation. And I want to thank you once again. And I hope that we carry on this conversation going forward.
Tu mera dost hai.
Yeah, tu mera dost hai, bhai. Tu mera bhai.
Always.
Dost nahi,
Tu
bhai.
mera bhai.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Lack. Love you,
You
man.